Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mosaic 2 Online. My name is Natasha Rossi. I will be your professor for this semester. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'll save more for our introductory voice thread to follow. I've been teaching at Temple in the IH department, so teaching Mosaic 1 and 2 since the fall of 2014. I like to tell people that I have the best job in the world because I get to read great books and talk about them with young people and get paid for it. So I think that that's a pretty cool thing. I am a sociologist by background. I got my PhD from Columbia University in 2012. Um, what does that mean for you? It means that I'll be bringing more of a sociological perspective to this course. You may know that Mosaic 2, sorry, not Mosaic 2, but the Intellectual Heritage Department in general is built of faculty with various backgrounds, and so we all kind of bring our own little thing into it. And so, like I said, I'll be bringing in a more sociological perspective. And what that means to you for you is that I'm probably going to try to spend a lot of time connecting this course and the texts we read, as old as they are, to our everyday social lives, to our social interactions, and thinking about how these interactions shape the groups in society and shape society as a whole. I'll get you to think a lot about how our society is organized and why it's organized in that way. What are the outcomes? What are the consequences of that social organization? And so I'm going to draw in a lot of connections to modern day society. And I really hope that you'll join me on that, that you'll bring in your own experiences as well, because that's really about what this course is about. It's not just about the books we're reading, but it's about their relevance today. And so we'll work together to connect those books to the class. Well, we're not in a classroom, but to stretch beyond just the texts themselves. So that's generally what this course is about. The syllabus has been posted on Blackboard. I hope you've read it by now, or I hope you're going to read it very soon. It's very important, obviously, with an online course that you take that syllabus and you read it from front to back. I know it's a little long and there's a lot of details in it, but give it a read. Send me an email if you have any questions about it. There's a section where I talk about the course objectives, and there's some objectives for the Mosaic sequence that are listed on the Intellectual Heritage webpage, and those all ring true, or will ring true for our course. But I wanted to take a little time here to give you a little sense about me and my expectations and what I think kind of the most important elements of this course are, and what I'm really looking for. And so I think the first goes without saying. The most important thing about this course is reading. That's why one of your assignments, which results in the biggest percentage of your grade, is your reading notes. So let me, before we even say anything about reading, let's just enter a disclaimer here. The readings for this course are hard. They're really hard. And that is in part the point of the course. We are learning how to read difficult texts and learning how to understand them. And so I know that this can be really discouraging at points, and especially at the beginning of the course. And so I'll just ask you to hang on, because I promise you it'll get better as we move forward. And also, you've probably seen this in Mosaic 1, that things got a little bit easier as you start to kind of learn how to read in a different way, right? I have to admit, I often have troubles too. So you might find in the course of this semester that you'll ask me a question about, well, what does Plato mean here? Or what does Marx mean when he says this? And I'll just say, I don't know. I have no idea. That's a really difficult passage, and I'm having troubles deciphering it. So you'll definitely hear me saying that. So don't be concerned if you're thinking that as well. An important thing to keep in mind when you're reading for this course is what our goals are. We are not preparing ourselves for a higher level philosophy course or something like that. We're looking for general themes, right? We're not, when we read Plato, we're not getting into the super nitty gritty of every sentence that Socrates puts out there, every little argument that he makes. We're going to read at a little bit of a higher, more general level. We will still be doing a close reading, but again, we're not going to read in order to have like deep, intense philosophical arguments. We're going to read and to use the text to think about the world we live in today. So, for example, when you're reading Plato, when you're reading the first book of Plato's Republic, you want to think about the general themes that he's commenting on. For instance, one of the big themes that Plato comments on in Book 1 is that of democracy. What is he saying about democracy? Is he in favor of it? Is he against it? Is he questioning it? What seems to be his problem with democracy? I will say this. Plato has a problem with democracy. So what is it, right? So these are the kinds of questions. This is the kind of general level that we're looking to read at. As you go through Book 1, you'll see there's an elderly gentleman by the name of Cephalus who has his own definition of what justice is, and I want you to think about, well, what kind of a conception of justice does Cephalus represent? Is that a good definition of justice from your perspective? Is it not such a good definition? And things like that. You don't need to get so much into the nitty-gritty of how exactly Socrates ripped that argument apart, and so on and so forth. And when we move further, we read Woolf and Wollstonecraft, for example. You want to think, well, what are the difference in their feminisms, right? They're both feminist writers, but what's the difference? Are they arguing for the same type of feminism? Would they define the word the same way? And things like that. You'll notice in the reading guides folder, I have placed a document called Conceptual Themes. And I strongly urge you to read this document before you begin reading the Republic. Because what it does is it kind of gives you these general themes that I'm talking about, this level that I want you to be reading at. It gives you a lot of questions to ask of the text. One of them is ethics, right? One of the questions that almost every text we're going to read has an answer to is, what does it mean to be a good person, right? So you can have a look at these themes, and if you're having troubles reading, you can say, well, what does the text say about these questions? You can use those. That is your ultimate reading guide, the Conceptual Themes document. And so you should always go there first when you're having troubles navigating the text. But again, just a reminder, these texts are really hard, and so we're going to have to work hard together in order to decipher them. The second thing I'm looking for in this course is critical thinking. Now, on the syllabus, I say, the primary goal of this course is to get you to understand and think critically about the ideas and theories behind our society, the reasons behind our beliefs and values. And this is precisely what we're going to do. We're going to look at something like democracy, and we're going to ask ourselves why we think it's the best way to organize our society. What are the alternatives? Why do the alternatives fall short? And so on and so forth. I'm going to play the devil's advocate a lot. I'm going to push you to really think about your arguments. What are you saying exactly? So don't be surprised if you see comments from me that really kind of push you to form a sharper argument, because this is one of the goals of this course. So the focus is going to be on making arguments as opposed to stating opinions, right? If you don't already understand the distinction between those two things, you're really going to understand it by the end of this course. So what does that mean? What is the difference between an argument and an opinion? Let's consider an example. Let's say you're having a discussion with a friend about whether or not it is the responsibility of government to help the poor. Now, you can think of all sorts of responses that your friend might give you. Let's go through some examples. First, your friend might say, well, yes, the government has a responsibility to help the poor. And I believe that because my family is Catholic, and in our church we're taught to help the poor, that that's the right thing to do. Now, okay, so this is an argument that kind of bows to the authority of the church, right? It's a traditional argument. It's a cultural argument. But the thing is that it explains why your friend should help the poor, but not you, right? If you're not Catholic, if those aren't a part of, if those aren't your values, then this is an argument that really falls on deaf ears, right? So, okay, so there's a problem with that argument, is that it's not shared because those values aren't shared, right? Second thing your friend might say is, well, yeah, I feel government should help the poor because if it doesn't, then I just feel really bad. I feel really bad when I see people that are poor and don't get help they need. And so it's a really good thing to do. It's a really nice thing to do. And you might say, okay, great. But that's an emotional reason, right? That's an argument based on emotion. It explains why you should help the poor because, or why your friend should, because your friend feels that way. But what if you don't feel the same way, right? Then why should you? It's not going to be very convincing if all of these arguments work for your friend, but they don't work for you, right? Another way of putting it is to say that these arguments are private. They're personal to the individual. They're not public reasons, right? They're based on personal feelings and opinions. They're not based on general principles that we should all abide by. So what we're looking for in this course are public, principled arguments, and they're a lot harder to form than you think. An example in this case would be, well, yes, I think the government should help the poor. Why? Well, because in American society, we value equality. And poverty is a result of inequality. So if we value equality, then the government should do what it can to promote equality. And so one of the things it should do is to help the poor and try to eliminate or minimize income inequality, and then we'd be working towards that principle. So you see there that your friend is drawing on this principle of equality that is shared by all within in society. So that makes it a public argument. It's not a private thing that your friend experiences alone. So I'm going to ask you to try to focus on these public principled arguments in this course. And the first chance you're going to have to do that, well, aside from the discussions, but where I really want you to kind of work this out, is in the blog assignments. And your first blog is about the meritocracy myth, or we can talk about the American dream, right? I'm going to ask you whether that is you'll understand the terminology later, but whether it's a noble lie or not. What you don't want to say is, oh yeah, the American dream is a great thing because that worked for my family. My family worked hard and they really succeeded. Because my family could have worked really hard and not gotten anywhere at all, you see? So that's a private argument. So I'm going to ask you to make a public argument about that. So that's the second thing that we'll focus on in this course, arguments as opposed to opinions. The third thing that we're going to look at or try to do is connect the course material to our everyday lives. I've already talked about that, but I really want to make the course personal in that way. I want us to examine the way we live and consider it, as I say in the syllabus, as being a very peculiar way of life. We believe in a liberal democracy. We believe in a free market enterprise. We value free speech. There are other values that we could hold, but we've chosen this set. Well, why? Why do we choose these? We're going to look at our society not as something assumed or assuming that, well, this is clearly the best, but ask why. So you'll see me kind of picking you like Socrates. I'll be a bit of a gadfly in getting us to think about that. Okay, in a later video, I'll give a little bit more instruction on how to use VoiceThread. For now, what you want to do is you want to go to the bottom right of your screen and you want to click on the arrow to move to the next slide, where I'll talk a little bit more about the requirements for the course.